Happy Friday, everyone. Welcome to Simulation Pulse Live. Today we're trying a different time of the day. We're going to do it at 10 a.m. Normally we do this at noon central, but we have an exciting discussion today ahead, and I'm going to turn it over to Bill Ballo from Madison College to introduce Melissa.
Awesome. Well, thank you, John. Hello, everyone, and sorry for my bad enunciation today. I had a medical procedure done on my lip, and so it's still a little swollen. It was actually yesterday, still a little swollen, and some of my P's and my B's and all of that stuff are going to sound a little weird today. So my apologies for that. Um, so a little background. We got started utilizing Acadicus in nursing this is a couple of years ago, and it started with Karen German and I were working on some stuff. Melissa was excuse me, I got to go back because it was Melissa, Karen, and I that really kind of started off working on some of these things. Jeff Wenzel as well. Jeff Wenzel was working on putting some stuff together for Acadicus as well. And then Karen got assigned to other duties, as happens at the college. And so the champion now for virtual reality for the nursing department at Madison College is Melissa Serwe. And Melissa, I will let you introduce yourself and what you do.
Thanks, Bill. So I'm Melissa Serwe, and I am, in my background, a nurse. And prior to working in simulation, I worked as a nurse educator at Madison College, teaching in the classroom and clinical setting. And during the pandemic, my position really shifted more into simulation. I became very heavily focused on working with the simulation program and trying to enhance our clinical experiences when we weren't able to get into the clinical setting. And then as the pandemic eased out and students were going back into the clinical setting, I stayed in simulation because I found something that I really enjoyed working on. And part of working in simulation at that time was it was about the time we started adopting the virtual reality platform in the nursing program and looking at how we could utilize it to continue to enhance our student learning in both clinical and the classroom. So now my official title is Simulation Educator. I work with the nursing program, and I also work with the other allied health programs at Madison College in anything related to simulation, whether it be mannequin-based or virtual reality, to try to help the faculty see how they can utilize simulation in their curriculum. So
Yeah,
that's what I do.
Awesome.
I'll
Very
never
cool.
forget our first experiences with VR with the nursing. We were in a small room. It was myself and Melissa and Karen, and we're in this small room. We're all like running into walls and hitting each other and all that kind of stuff. But it was a lot of fun, and I think that was sort of that was our first foray into it. Why am I using F words? Why am I using F words? So that was our first exploration of virtual reality for the nursing department. And it was interesting because I watched it explode from there. Like it went really quick with the nursing department. They caught on really quick and they went, hey, we like this, and they wanted to continue with it. So I was really excited when they did that. So
And you were using laptops at the time, right? I remember early on with Madison College, before the XR Center existed, there were 4 Alienware laptops with 4 Oculus Rift S's. I think those were the headsets that we were using. Maybe even no, they were Rift S. I think it was at that because this was about 4 years ago, I want to
yeah,
say.
about 4 years ago, I started why do 4 and 5 have to? I started with it about 5 years ago, and then about 4 years ago, nursing we got involved. We got to working together. Yeah.
Yeah, so you had those laptops, which was, it's sort of it's good and bad because you've got the flexibility and mobility of being able to set it up wherever you want. So I remember it was a matter of finding a place to set it up and making sure that the network connection was there, getting the headsets configured, and then running simulations. But so there's the mobility and the flexibility of that, but you didn't have really like a dedicated space to do it. And I think that was a lot of what informed kind of moving it into the XR Center and having a dedicated space, because it was, I think it's a lot for educators to have to like not only run the simulation and know the case you're going to run and be able to work with the students, but be able to like learn how to use a VR headset and set that up and configure it. So having a dedicated space allowed you to kind of have this stuff always ready to go. And, Bill is there on hand and ready to run the hardware and have everything. So that was part of what spawned, I think, that idea of going into the XR Center, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. And it did have a lot to do with nursing because we knew, watching Melissa and Karen, and listening to them and listening to the way that they talked about the possibilities, um, that really, we went, there's so much more we're going to be doing. So we really need a space. We really need a place to be. And one that's close too. Like we couldn't be like super, super far away. And we started out, we had they had 4 laptops and we had them set up in sort of an upstairs like storage area. Melissa, am I describing that correctly? It's like 4 bay.
Yeah, it was originally designed for lab checkoffs. There were 4 bays, and it was designed for lab checkoffs, but they never really happened there because they happened in the lab. Rather than moving everything to these bays, everybody kept working in the labs. So it really ended up becoming like a storage space for anybody in nursing that needed a place to throw something big. You'd throw it in the bays that weren't being used for lab checkoffs. So that was the initial space we looked at taking over to utilize for nursing simulation.
Yeah, and nursing's got an interesting thing as well. They not only are they at our Truax campus, but then also at Watertown and Reedsburg. And so actually the laptops have been great because, I have an event with them coming up next month in 2 actually now in Reedsburg. And it's, it's travel, so I can just pull that stuff up there. But we are equipping them. We just finished a capital request, and we'll be equipping those areas with some of their own virtual reality stuff, so that I won't have to keep doing that. If I'm going up there, it'll just be me, or if Melissa and I are going up there, it'll just be us instead of having to carry a bunch of gear with us as well. So. And you actually, on that note, John, if you're okay with it, I should show the XR Center.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And while you're getting that ready, Melissa, what was your first, do you remember your first experience or your first sort of impression of VR back in the day when you were first getting started? Like what was your initial reaction to it?
Well, I at first was very hesitant. I was very comfortable with what I knew, and so I initially was very hesitant on buying into how we could use virtual reality. I was excited, I was interested, but I was hesitant at the same time. But the turning point for me was when we had a group of high school students coming in and we were showing them about different healthcare programs. And Bill set us up with some headsets, and those students put on the headsets and they like knew what to do. We had students delivering a baby that were high school students that had no idea what they were doing, but they were so engaged and they knew exactly. Like, I'm hesitant at the time because I had never used VR. I had never put on a headset, but these students were coming into us and they were experienced. They had either had opportunity in school or they had their own headsets at home. So they hopped right in and we were able to get right to talking about how to be a healthcare professional while they had the Oculus on, and they just jumped in and they were doing things that they wouldn't do if we put them in a live lab. They might sit back and be a little bit more hesitant, but they knew what they were doing with that headset on. And that to me was the turning point where I said, this is what our future student needs. We need to engage them in a way that will keep them interested, will keep them engaged and active and participating. And this really is where they're coming to us from with this experience. So my older person mindset that had never had a headset on, that was like, oh, I don't know if this is quite what we need to be doing. I realized this is what we need to be doing because these are the students that we're serving, and we need to be where they're at.
That's fantastic. So it really, we hear a lot of different reasons why instructors get excited about, whether it's because they're recognizing they've got a shortage or it's cost savings and the mannequins are too expensive or whatever. But for you, it was really seeing the student reaction, seeing the student engagement, seeing how interested and comfortable they were with it, and recognizing that that's going to likely be a part of the future of simulation in some capacity.
Yeah, we see students, they get so bored so easily with our typical curriculum, and we have to keep them engaged. Otherwise, we're going to lose them. They're not going to learn the competencies that we want them to learn. So we have to keep learning interesting for them, and we need to keep them engaged, because the minute we lose their interest and they start thinking about other things during class or during clinical, we are losing the opportunity to help them learn and grow and become future healthcare professionals. So definitely meeting our learners where they're at is important.
That makes a lot of sense to me. And, and it's been something that's really, I've been learning as I've been going along, where I'm talking to so many people in their implementations, that, there's a value to the act of essentially putting something on the student's eyes, where these are students who are used to like every 10 seconds looking at their phones, and the minute they've got those headphones on, or the headset on, and they've got hand controllers, like they can't be looking at their phones anymore. So right out of the gates, you've got this sort of like forced focus in a way, and not that that's what you would like it to take, but it works that way. Like once the students are in there, it's not that they're being like they can't look at their phones, but they want to. They forget all about that. They want to be in the scene because they just get so immersed in it. And I think that has value. And I've also heard Mitch Luker from NWTC, who's here today as well, mention that, once they're in the headset, they can't see the instructor watching them anymore. And that affects, and I've heard students say that themselves, where they're like, when I go into a traditional simulation, I know the instructor standing there watching me, and I make mistakes I wouldn't make if I was in a hospital caring for a patient, because I'm nervous and I know they're staring at me. But the minute I put the headset on, I don't see them anymore. And it's about focusing on the patient. So you're really looking at the learning objectives and the engagement with the patient, rather than worrying about your performance in front of instructors or other students.
Absolutely. And like last week, I think Jamie said you have to put the headset on. Like you will not understand this unless you put the headset on and actually feel that immersion. Because until I put a headset on, I didn't know, like, I knew what you all told me, that like, you will feel like you're there. It only takes like 30 seconds to shift your mindset and your brain to being engaged in that moment. But until you actually feel that and you get immersed and you know how that feels, you can be very hesitant like I was until I got the headset on. Once I got the headset on, I knew exactly what you all were telling me was very true. And yeah, you need to get the headset on though, because you can talk about it all day long, but until you actually experience it yourself, it's one of those things that's hard to believe until you do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. And that's made it a little bit easier over the years, since when we first started, we got a lot of people saying, well, I've already tried VR, and you ask them, well, what do you mean by that? Well, my nephew had a Google Cardboard and I did a roller coaster and it made me motion sick, and it's like, well, you got to trust me. It's come a long way since then, or the early days where the original Oculus came with an Xbox controller, and that was the only way you could move around in the environment. And it made everyone motion sick, because you were moving forward and backward, which now we recognize there's better ways to handle that with teleporting and everything else. But it's this constantly moving thing. But now so many people have Meta Quest now that it's becoming exceedingly rare where we'll have a demo, and we always ask, have you tried VR? And nowadays almost everybody's at least had some experience with it. And they kind of recognize now that these headsets are getting better and better, and the experience is really good and it is immersive. But you do have to try it. You're absolutely right. And Jamie's right too. You just got to put the headset on.
Sometimes that's some of the steps that we have to get over first. We have to help people come in. What I always do when I'm doing a demo in the center is like, I'll show up on the screen. Okay, here's what it's going to look like from my point of view. These are the things that I'm going to see. Here's Here's how you work the simulation manager, those kind of things. And everybody sits there and goes, oh, wow, yeah, that's really great. That's really awesome. And then I go, okay, now let's go on in there and let's put the headsets on and you all get to go in and take care of a patient. And they, at that point, they go, oh, like, wow, that's completely different. I did not expect that we were going, like for it to be like this. And there's a lot of expectations of what it is. There are other things that people have tried, used, like you said, John, and they go, I didn't really like that. But what I think we tried to do is take what came from their normal simulation environment, right, with physical mannequins, and just put it right into a virtual reality area where I have more control over, especially the environment around the patient. And I think that's really one of the things that virtual reality is great for. I mean, I'm not expecting someone to learn how to start an IV in VR. I'm not expecting that. But to have them suspend the reality that they're not talking to an actual patient, right? I want them to think I'm talking to an actual person and they're talking to me. And we've even gone so far as to say, like, Bill, you can't be the helper because I'm always trying to come in like I want to go in and help with the scenario and if I need to, and they can call me in and they're like, no, because you were just the patient. So it's way too weird for you to now come in as the helper too. And so I had to suspend that desire to come in and be the helper because I just act as the the sim operator, the sim tech. So I had to kind of suspend that because it is so realistic. And because now they're going, wait, now the patient's the help. What's going on? I don't get this. So yeah, we had to kind of route around that. So yeah.
And Melissa, would you say that, when you first got started, that, in terms of facilitating a simulation, one of the concerns that we hear from a lot of instructors is that they just don't have time to learn a new tool. Like I got to learn this whole new thing, and it's like I'm already very busy and we've got a lot going on, and now I've got to learn a new tool. What would you say was your experience in terms of like onboarding with the process of facilitation and, just getting students through the experience? Are you focused mainly on the sort of the pre-briefing and debriefing, and Bill is serving as a tech, or are you doing some of the technician stuff? How do you actually run these simulations in practice?
So in practice, whether it's myself or another nursing faculty, their experience really should be no different than if they're doing a mannequin-based simulation. And that for me, because I work with new faculty coming in and using simulation and the VR, it's really hard to get them to believe that. You don't need to do anything different because when I am with a group of students, I do the pre-brief and then I take them to the XR Center and Bill shows them their environment that they're going to be in, explains virtual reality. Bill takes care of teaching them how to use the headset, how to use their hand controllers. And then as a faculty, I sit back and I watch and I evaluate just like I would in a mannequin-based simulation. Um, and then following the simulation, I take care of handling the debrief with the students and we talk through the scenario. So as a faculty, my experience is no different than if it were a mannequin-based simulation, which is familiar to me. So that's what I try to, when I'm onboarding new faculty to come in and use virtual reality, because they're always like, I don't, like, I really don't want to learn something new and I got so much going on and I've already got this figured out. And if I can get them to come in, I just say, you're going to do the same thing. And that's where it has been helpful with the Gen 2 patients because we can take our face-to-face simulations and we can utilize them in virtual reality very easily. So it can be a starting point for the faculty. They can do a simulation that they're familiar with because they've already done it in a mannequin-based world, take them to virtual reality, do it there, and they can see really that their role is the same in virtual reality as it is in mannequin-based. And there's nothing really that they need to learn. If they want to learn more, Bill's more than willing to help them learn about some of the background and the operations piece that he does. But if they want to be hands off and they just want to continue pre-briefing, debriefing, and evaluating their students like they're used to, it's completely feasible in virtual reality to do that.
That's
The
great.
nursing,
Yeah.
the
Go ahead,
nursing
Bill.
faculty really like to learn how to do these things. They really do. It kind of started off where they were more like, I just want to be the faculty member. I just want to do what I need to do. But that hasn't been the case moving forward. And with Melissa as well. Melissa is really like this happened the last time we had a scenario. A student was having a problem with, adjusting their headset. And so I'm ready to like take my headset off, get out, go see what's going on, and Melissa's already over there helping out. And I'm like, oh, great. Okay, never mind. So like they're on their own, they're figuring it out and going, no, I got this, Bill. You stay where you're at. And it's been really cool to see that evolution. They've just really, grabbed onto it.
So it's an evolution of the role of the instructor, but stemming from a starting point where nothing is different. You're doing the same thing you're doing with mannequins, and that's what we're always trying to explain that to people because they see VR as this new thing they have to learn, and it's intimidating. So as a result, I think that's what's driving a lot of nursing schools into these pre-programmed experiences where students are just putting on a headset and doing it all along, all by themselves, whereas this is facilitated. So people, I think, see that and they're a little intimidated, like, well, I prefer the one where I don't have to do anything. The student just goes off in the corner and does it by themselves, and the software handles the pre-briefing and the debriefing, and I don't have to do anything. Well, that's not really high fidelity simulation if you're not facilitating it, and if you're not having that discussion, and if you're not facilitating within when the simulation is being run. That's different than what you've been doing for 50 years in simulation. That's a whole different thing. And so I think what we're trying to do is build on that existing modality so that you don't have to change anything. However, I think the key here is that you can't just do that without also evolving the role of the technician, right? Simulation has always had sim techs, like they have their own conference, the sim ghosts, there's a whole industry of technicians that support simulations with mannequins, and they have very specialized training to maintain these mannequins. And, I think that's what I see as an evolution of their role, is also learning how to handle, and it doesn't have to be the same technician. It could be, anybody that's interested and excited about virtual reality that wants to learn how to set up the headsets, make sure the Guardian, it doesn't matter what platform you're using, you're going to need a technician that can help you get it set up and run it, because there's always going to be issues. Even if it's just a standalone, completely pre-programmed experience, you still need a technician to help set up the headsets regardless of what platform you're using. So I think that's the role of that support, is having somebody like Bill, who's a guru in VR, that you can just bring students in there and just know that it's going to work. You don't have to worry about, like, I have to wait, do Windows updates or anything. It's all handled for you, and I think Madison College is lucky to have somebody like Bill that also has all the experience in simulation and with paramedic experience. So I think that's the real combo here that's helping accelerate that, is having a technician that knows all of the background of simulation and can help facilitate and help, participate in that. So it's an interesting sort of evolution. And yeah, I was going to say, Bill, you were going to show the XR Center and I cut you off earlier.
No,
So
that's okay. I will show that. But
okay, good.
actually, what I wanted to tail off of was something that Melissa had mentioned. So she had mentioned that some of our faculty wanted to use scenarios they were familiar with, right? So you don't have to learn a whole new scenario. Now, we have the OpenRN, we have all of those, and we've been using Bjorn quite frequently. We like him. But one of the things that Melissa had originally come and said, is it possible to set up based on this scenario, and handed me a scenario and said, can this be done? And I looked at the scenario and I went, yeah. And it took me a little while to kind of get this set up. It was, maybe, I don't know, an hour or two to try to set it up the way that I wanted it. And then I brought the faculty in to see it and to try it out. And then they gave me feedback. And then we kind of went back and forth, making sure that we had it exactly the way that we wanted it. But this is based off of the GI bleed and cirrhosis scenario. That's all this patient is. This is the patient from GI bleed. And I took some stuff out, put some stuff in, and then, this patient actually is the Gen 2 patient, and he goes from congestive heart failure to cardiac arrest, which is why we have, all of so we have the life pack over here, right? And then, I had to create a code blue button and all that kind of stuff so that, you can actually get more of a feeling that you're working a cardiac arrest actually in that environment. So this is created off of a scenario that was handed to me by Melissa, and she said, "Can you do this?" And I was like, "Yeah, I think I can." And that was it. I just took a patient that we already had that was in there, created that scenario around him, and that's it. Just like we would with a simulation mannequin, instead of trying to say, no, I'm sorry, you have to learn this scenario. I don't have that scenario. You have to learn this one. They didn't have to do that. We just created the scenario.
Or send it to a team of programmers and wait, 18 months or so for just that slight modification, which is,
Right.
and that content, that was, I believe, Medical College of Wisconsin is doing the cirrhosis and GI bleed. And, they share it in the library like everybody else. And Madison College has developed a massive amount of content that's shared in the library. I don't know what percentage it is, but it's a pretty high percentage of the content that's in there is Madison College sponsored, and all of that being shared. So now you're working with content that's being developed with another school and taking it to a whole different, and I guarantee if they see when they see this, they're going to be pretty excited to see that their content is having this whole different life that they never imagined, I think, when they were writing that case.
It's really cool to see people using the stuff that we like, especially the birthing mannequin. I think that's just so cool. That was we knew how important that was going to be to every program, and it's been awesome. It's been really cool to see. And we have an event coming up now on the 18th that I'll be doing up at Reedsburg. Is it the 18th? April 18th, I think, that I'll be doing up in Reedsburg, and utilizing the birthing mannequin. We're going to be doing some birthing scenarios. So one of my favorites. I love it. So yeah,
Well,
I'll show the XR Center here in a bit. No
yeah,
worries.
yeah, go ahead and show it. I'd love to.
Yeah.
We'd love to see it.
Let me. You go ahead and talk. I'll pull this up. Actually, never
So
mind. I got it. That was quick.
you got it. Okay, good.
I'm getting good at this Zoom thing. I don't know. Again, you're just really, So here's the XR Center. So this is located on our second floor. It's between our B wing and C wing.
And right.
Truex.
Yeah, you were going to press play, but I didn't mean to interrupt. But I just wanted to say, in the planning of the XR Center, there's a lot of subtle nuances that happen right here in this image that you can see that went into the planning. When we first started looking at this space, it was only the door. It just had a door with a solid, and you couldn't really see what was going on inside. So Carly Brady, who was really a lot of the energy behind building the XR Center and leading development of it just masterfully. She identified early on, she's like, we need people to be able to walk by and see what's going on in there, because it's about generating excitement and letting students see what's possible and letting other faculty see, hey, there's a lot going on in here, check it out, and seeing how, so she, really insisted on having this new window added with that. You see the XR logo there, which I think is brilliant, right? Because now everybody, when you go to the XR Center, it happens all the time. Your desk is right on the other side of that glass, and I'm sure you can attest to the fact that everybody's always wanting to look in there and putting their nose prints on the glass, checking it out, because it's like, whoa, what's going on in here?
As a matter of fact, in this video, you'll see some.
Okay.
I got upset at myself because I'm like, I forgot to clean those off, but it's actually a good example. I usually sit right there, and then this is a high traffic area. So I have a lot of people that'll come by and, they'll look in, they'll wave, they'll step in, they'll ask questions. One of the questions I get from the students is, why is my teacher not using this? And I'm like, well, they could be. So, let's talk to them about it. And then they're like, well, it's architecture. I'm like, oh, architecture is using it. You haven't gotten there yet, I don't think. Are you new in architecture? You're like, I just started. Oh, architecture is using it. You will get there. I promise. We'll see you in the XR Center, So so I'll run it through. And the pods, what's interesting, these pods that you saw over here to the right, one of the things that we can do is we can actually give a student a headset allow them to sit in there sit in the pod for a little bit and sort of do, that was Carly's idea, was to sort of chill out, go to a different area, those kind of things. So, so I can do those kind of things where I can rent that out. One of the things that we wanted in the XR Center was we wanted a teaching area too. And so I wanted to make sure that, because a lot of faculty, what they'll do is they'll have, like they'll do some lecturing, or they'll do some, some theory class before it. And they're like, yeah, but then I got to go from over there and I got to come across, and it's snowing outside and it's, 3 degrees or something like that. And I say, no, 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 just come on in. You can, right. You can have the entire XR Center. You can use the 85-inch TVs, that kind of stuff. Jonathan Milton actually did that the other day. It was neat because I walked in and Jonathan was sitting in there with his entire class, and he's like, is it okay that I'm doing this? I'm like, yeah, it's absolutely great. I told you early on, please do, by all means. Come in, teach your class, go through everything that you need to go through, and then we can get into virtual reality. It's no problem at all. So we wanted some barriers, not really for sound or anything like that, just physical barriers to separate people a little bit so that they could, just have a little bit of that live separation. But we also want to be able to see them, so we found these that had the plexiglass inserts here at the top.
I can see you have some of the stations are VR and some are set up for non-VR. So you don't, any student that's uncomfortable being in a VR headset, it's totally fine. They just use the non-VR access point.
Yep, and any one of the stations can be either one. So we can go back and forth with any of the stations. So if it turns out like, we need this station rather than this station, we can absolutely do that. So
because those desks move up and down. Those are sit stand desks. Clean boxes for disinfecting after simulations.
Yeah, and this has actually become kind of an interest of people. They're really fascinated by the fact that this works so quickly. So that it cleans this headset so quickly. It's kind of neat.
And you got one at each station. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and we have all total, we have 13 stations, counting my station up at the sitting area there. Teaching station is number 12, and then we're expandable to about 16. Down the middle there if we have to with our laptops. We still have a bunch of laptops. I still have a wagon that I take up to Reedsburg, or I take over to Watertown, and we do the events there. So
right in that slide right there, the storage lockers, I think, were an important. I know these are real subtle things that you might not think of, but when you've got students coming in and they're putting headsets on, they can't see their backpack if they set it down on the floor next to them, and you never know, anything can happen. So being able to allow students to be able to put their goods in the lockers, lock them up, and do the simulation is nice. Again, you wouldn't necessarily think of that, but that's super helpful. And then you've got some storage lockers, the gray ones to the left of it, that you can store all the mobile headsets and other things that you've got in there. But also that stool, the stools with the table, I think, are an important thing, because it looks, if you come in and all you see is the comfy chairs and the big debriefing area, it seems like a classroom. It seems like the thing you need to be invited in there, and it's a formal thing. But that table and that configuration to me says, come on in. This is like almost like a cafe in a way. You could come in here and just hang out. It's a lounge. It kind of has like a lounge kind of feel to it. And I've seen it every single time I've come to see the XR Center. People are just hanging out. They're just sitting around those chairs, and that's what you want, is people to come in there and experience being in that space.
Yep, absolutely. And then Carly had a quote.
Oh yeah, I got a quote on the wall.
There,
That's great.
which is great.
There's a lot of envy over Madison College's XR Center. The demos that we're doing, people are seeing the videos that we put up, and they're like, how do I build something like that? We're getting a lot of people asking about it.
One of the things too is like you don't have to start there. We didn't start there. We didn't start with an XR Center like that. We started, with me and a laptop. Actually, even before that, we started with me, and then Arch Virtual helped us out with a graphics card, an external graphics card for the computer that we were working on, to do that when I was teaching theory. That was what we did. So yeah. Yeah, you don't have to start with the big XR center. That's where we've evolved to. But just start somewhere. Just start somewhere. The next generation of student is really, really asking for this kind of stuff. And as a matter of fact, I'll share my screen one more time. Speaking of the next generation of student, this is actually my 12-year-old son. And my daughter is actually, she's over on the other side through it. So, but he's actually testing out a product for me. So he knows more about virtual reality than in some cases than I do. And then a lot of the people that I know, and he just, I handed him a headset and he flew right through it. He's testing out a new product for me to see whether or not it's something that we should be implementing at the XR Center. So
Younger kids are really good at finding bugs. They'll go in there and they'll find what's broken immediately. I found, they're great bug testers, QA testers
I felt a
for
little
sure.
bad when he gave his feedback. I was like, I don't know. Should I like bring some of this in before I hand it to them? No, no. Let it go. Let it go. So,
For sure, for sure. Do you see anything, some of the schools we talk to, they talk about interdisciplinary simulations. Melissa too, do you see any future potential, or have you already run kind of, there's obviously, healthcare, it runs the whole spectrum. It's not in these neatly organized sort of buckets the way we teach it, where we're only doing nursing simulation, we're only doing paramedic simulation. There's an opportunity once we're in this virtual world, or even with the physical mannequins, to be able to run simulations that involve multiple different types of disciplines from, pharmacology. I know we have scenarios for that. Does Madison College have any future for kind of building interdisciplinary simulations in the future?
So that is something that I am definitely working on. We don't have anything currently. We're actually just starting to work on it, even in the mannequin-based simulations. But the advantage with virtual reality is because we have 5 campuses that run a nursing program out of them. But a lot of our other disciplines are only offered at the Madison-based Truax campus. So, in order for those regional students to have an experience with other health disciplines at our school, we would have to have them either travel to our Madison-based Truax campus, which can be a hardship. Some of our campuses are up to an hour away, and that's a lot of additional travel time to ask those students to participate in. But if we use virtual reality, we can bring students from the 2 different campuses together without having to involve them in travel. And it also makes schedules a lot more flexible when you don't have to factor in travel. Um, so that is definitely a place where I see virtual reality being helpful, especially in our desire to get the different disciplines and the different healthcare professions working together. Um, yeah, like I said, we're new to this even in the mannequin-based simulation. So we're working on growing that, and I see virtual reality being definitely very helpful.
That's really interesting you say that. So it's the interdisciplinary possibilities are great, but also I think, the multiple campuses is one great use case for virtual reality simulation in general, because a lot of times your faculty members aren't going to necessarily, you're going to have faculty that are specialized in things in one campus or another, that you could imagine a world where once the VR headsets are set up on all the campuses, you could say, all right, next week at this time, we're going to run a scenario, and one instructor from one campus can teach students from all the different campuses simultaneously at the same time. There's really, geography doesn't matter. Like once you're in the headset, it doesn't matter where you are. So I think that really opens up a lot of new possibilities. Potentially even bringing people in that are remote, completely remote. You could bring in an expert in, asthma or birthing or whatever, and have them come in and give a guest lecture from somewhere hundreds or thousands of miles away. There's a whole new world of possibilities once you're in that virtual world.
yeah, and I know I mentioned it last week. Carly and I did a little experiment with that when Carly traveled over to Denmark, and she was working with some of the faculty over there on their simulation. And Melissa, you weren't on that first trip, were you? You were on the second one, Right, right, okay. And I was here in my office, and Carly was over with the faculty in Denmark, and I was kind of teaching them how to do some wound care and how to do some stapling. And it was great. And you could tell right there, like that possibility where you can have those people together, no matter where they're at, and no matter what their backgrounds are too.
Yeah, I can imagine a time in the future where, because it's one of the advantages we have as a vendor is we get the eagle eye view of the whole industry. It's like it's almost like an unfair advantage that we get. We get to talk to all the schools all over the country, and I think that's one of the things that I hear all the time is that, some schools have like experts in one given field, and then other schools are desperate to find that kind of expertise. So I get really excited when I think about the idea of this sort of interconnected, eventually like a global sim lab where there's cross, collaboration where these experts can reach students at all different locations. And, there's this sharing instead of everybody being in individual silos, which is, it's sort of necessitated by working with physical hardware. Like, if you're working with a physical mannequin, you have to be next to it for it to work. You can share it over Zoom, which we did a lot of during the pandemic, but it's not quite the same as being able to handle a ringscope to somebody that's hundreds and hundreds of miles away and they just grab it from you and proceed, and you don't even, it's like you're together in the same room.
Yeah, you do lose that feeling that you're not together, you know? When I was doing that, I took that stapler and handed it to the faculty member from Denmark, and he grabbed it and he went, "Oh, okay, is that how that works?" We didn't even think about the fact that we had just handed something, thousands of miles. Like, we didn't even think about it. And it was really cool. It was really cool.
So what do you see as the future of, we're touching a little bit on the future of virtual simulation, now, but like what do you see as like the real ultimate potential if we look out, 5 years from now? Like all obstacles are removed, everything works out. What does this look like? Students with a headset in their backpacks, or decentralized campuses, everybody's learning from remote locations. Like what happens in the future? What do you think?
Melissa, what do you think? Everybody
I don't
knows
know.
what I
Some
think.
days it's hard to get through the day to day. I thinking about
I
the
can
future can be
imagine.
hard, but I think that the future doesn't have the limits that sometimes our brains put on it. I think we need to be open to all sorts of ideas, like thinking about, like Bill, you were talking about your experience with Carly in Denmark, and because I went on the second trip to Denmark, and all I could think was I learned so much while I was there from the students about healthcare in other countries. I'd like my students back here to have that same experience, but it's not possible to fly everybody to Denmark. But if we could do something in virtual reality to connect people who normally wouldn't connect, would be, I mean, just opening up a world of possibilities. So I think we just need to be open and not limit our ideas of where virtual reality can take us, because um, sometimes we limit ourselves, and we need to keep an open mind and always think about how we can grow and use it more in different ways.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Like the cross-cultural kind of connection with people from completely different areas that, you never know what that could bring, even in terms of, for students, it's amazing, but even for practicing professionals to meet with other practicing professionals from other parts of the world, you never know where that that collaboration might occur where they see something a little different. Like, well, here's how we do it. Well, why do you do it like that? Well, because of this, the opportunities for that to spread, I know Like when Mayo Clinic in the early days, like that's kind of how they got their global fame was, they were traveling all over the world teaching people the techniques that they were innovating. And they got this reputation as a result of it. And so being able to have that sort of like the theater of it to be able to kind of share, like we came up with a new way of doing things and we want to share that across different geographic regions. It makes it a whole lot easier when you don't have to get on a plane and travel all over the world to do that. You could just invite people into your virtual sim lab.
Yeah, we can give people the opportunity to meet with the experts that they would have never seen before, that there's no way you would have ever seen before, um, and to learn from them the things that, again, you would have never had an opportunity to learn. I've gotten to meet some really cool people that work in Acadicus that I would have never known them before, you know? So it's been great. It's, I think one of the things that we've looked at too at the college is like, how can we plan for that eventual future? Because, we built some things, some assets within the environment that are non-healthcare related, and they're more like, this is what we see as potential for the future, rather than this is what's going to get used tomorrow. It's this is what's going to be used for tomorrow.